Hi, everyone. I'm honored to stand before all of you today. My name is Lindsay Sagnet, and I'm Jenny Finney Boylan's editor here at Crown and Hogarth. I'm introducing a writer who hardly needs an introduction, or actually does need one because she does so many amazing things, one of which is make me feel lazy every single day. The prodigiously talented Jenny Finney Boylan is the author of 14 books, including the landmark memoir, She's Not There, A Life in Two Genders, which was the first best-selling work by a transgender American. She's currently the inaugural Anna Quinlan Writer-in-Residence at Barnard College. She serves as the national co-chair of the board of directors of GLAAD, and you may have seen her beautiful, intelligent writing in the New York Times, where she's been contributing some of their most popular op-eds since 2007. A novelist, memoirist, and short story writer, she is a nationally known advocate for civil rights. And when she's not being an all-out literary hero, you can find her in Hollywood, where she consults on both Transparent and I Am Kate. Jenny is here today, however, as a novelist and as the author of a tremendous new book, a riveting and incredibly moving novel about the nature of identity and the pull of the past. I'm thrilled to be her editor and to have her tell you about Long Black Veil. Without further ado, here's Jenny.
Thanks, Lindsay. Thanks, librarians, and thanks to these incredible authors. How would you like to go on after these five? I don't know whose book I want to read first, but I'm going to read them all, and it's a real honor to follow you all. And to speak to you, librarian friends. I know all of us have spent a little time expressing our admiration and our love and our gratitude to you, but I mean, really, we would not have a profession were it not for you, and so I'm tremendously, sincerely, personally grateful. Not just for the work you do promoting literature, but also the work you do defending literature, which I hope this isn't true, but which may be an increasingly important skill in the years to come. My new novel, Long Black Veil, is my first work of fiction for adults in 19 years. It's funny because for a long time I thought that my life would be divided not only by gender, but by genre, by which I mean that when I was a boy, yes, I am transgender in case some of you didn't get the memo, I wrote fiction. And when I became female, almost 20 years ago now, I started writing nonfiction. It wasn't an intentional switch, unlike the other one. But as years went by, it made more and more sense to me that as I spent this, I've written here last third of my life, I hope that sounds, the podium here, that suddenly seems rather grim. This, let's say second half of my life. Living my truth, I would also, as a writer, focus on work that was itself based on fact rather than on invention. But as time has gone on, the truth of Oscar Wilde's epigram has come back to haunt me, which is to say that sometimes it is easiest to tell the truth when you wear a mask. And so that brings us to Long Black Veil, a book that is, on one level, fiction, and suspense, a tale of murder and disappearance and disguise. And yet, I think anyone familiar with my work will recognize that this new book, page-turner, though I hope it may be, is about the same fundamental questions of identity that have been my primary concern since the publication of She's Not There back in 2003. So, okay, let's start with the plot. A hot summer day in 1980 in Philadelphia, 6 college friends are exploring the ruins of a real place, Eastern State Penitentiary, which some of you may be familiar with, those of you, especially those who are from Philly. It is the oldest prison in the United States, designed by Benjamin Franklin, opened its doors in 1829 and closed them in 1971, so 9 years before the story begins. It is then and now something of a medieval ruin, a castle with arrow-slit windows surrounded by high stone walls, turret corners, and it sits there right in the heart of Philadelphia. It's a whole city block, a short walk from the Museum of Art. When the novel opens, these 6 friends are goofing around the way young people do. They break in and explore the ruins of Eastern State, and then accidentally get themselves locked in. And just as quickly find out that behind the walls of Eastern State, they are not alone. That's chapter 1. You know, it's funny, I'm thinking about the difference between talking about a novel and talking about a memoir. Like a memoir, you know, like I'm a woman and I'm alive, so you kind of know how it's going to turn out in the end. Talking about a novel is a little more complex, especially when I'm suspense, because I have to be really careful not to give anything away here. But I can tell you that the day ends with a disappearance and a murder, and the events of that awful day, as you can imagine, haunt these young people the rest of their lives as they try to figure out not only who it was that took the life of their friend, but also how to live their lives as adults when this shadow lies upon them. I got the idea for Long Black Veil when I visited Eastern State a few years ago with a friend of mine. A couple things struck me, one of which was just how unbelievably creepy the place is, with the thousands of cells with their walls covered with graffiti, some of which is from the 19th century, things carved into the plaster lines like, "I am innocent," and with the beds, some of them still with their moldering sheets and pillows in the corners of the cells. There's a library. This will break your heart. There is a library with the roof caved in, a decaying chapel, a mess hall, and an especially creepy-looking medical wing that still contains X-ray machines and operating rooms from the 1940s. The creepiness of the place is also quite clearly on the minds of the people who, in the 1990s, turned Eastern State into a joint museum and archaeological project. They run an event there from September through December called Terror Behind the Walls, billed as the world's largest haunted house inside the walls of a real prison. My trip to Eastern State, though, put me in mind of other kinds of prisons, the kinds that we create for ourselves, the kinds that people bear in their hearts. And as a transgender person, I can tell you all about the many ways in which people can find themselves trapped in life, imprisoned, and the desperate measures they take in order to break free and live their truth. But that sense of imprisonment or being trapped is not unique to trans people, of course. I think that this sense, which I sometimes think of as haunting, is something we all experience, particularly if we have a moment in our lives that marks a before and an after. I think in some ways that's what it means to be haunted, isn't it? To have some life-changing moment that you never really get over, and that because you never really get over it, you wind up imprisoned in the past, living there in that moment of great trauma or great joy, unable to move on. In my many travels as an author these last 20 years, I can tell you I've met many people who I could describe as formers and exes and used-to-bes, including some ex-nuns. But there are, I mean, if you think about it, many people that we know are defined by not who they are, but who they were. If you've ever met anyone who's lost a child, or even just anyone who's been through a divorce, or people who used to be in the service, in some ways, really, if you think about it, it's everybody, right? Who among us isn't haunted by something or someone? And so I wonder, what do we do with these ghosts? How do we manage to break free of them? And if you're a person like me, for example, what does it mean to be a woman who never had a girlhood, whose ex-self, whose former self, in fact, was a boy? Well, I don't want to give anything away about the rest of Long Black Veil, but I don't think anyone would be incredibly shocked if I suggested there just might be a transgender person somewhere in the book. The revelation of that is part of the fun of the book, I hope. So I'm not going to give too much away. But let's just say that one of the people we meet as a 20-year-old in 1980 grows up to be a woman living in what my people call stealth. Now, stealth for transgender people means that you go through a transition and then move someplace where no one knows your past, and you never tell anyone who you used to be. Believe it or not, this used to be the thing that they would prescribe for transgender people, that you were supposed to go through the change and then just cut yourself off from everyone else you ever knew. Never talk to your family, your friends, change your profession, move to a new town, change your name. That was how they told people you could be sane in this world. Our heroine in Long Black Veil is named Judith Carrigan, a fine Irish Catholic name, a trans woman who is living in stealth in Maine. We got to talk. And by the way, can I just say, I recently found out a woman wrote me and said, by the way, I think I'm your cousin. Her name was MJ Boylan. I said, really, where are you from? Gloucester, Mass. I said, and we checked it out. Yes, we have a great uncle, a great grandfather in common. She says, oh, by the way, you should know there's 25 of us. And so I had this amazing experience of going from, in fact, having lost virtually my whole family as a result of going through transition. And suddenly one day there were 25 Boylans that I didn't know, and now I'm stuck with them. It was fun for the first we were sending emails. Now it's oh my God. And how many of those 25 Irish Catholic Boylans are still Catholic? You might ask. Okay, so we'll talk anyway. But back to Long Black Veil. I'm selling her book, actually. Did you know this? Our heroine is named Judith Carrigan, and none of the people around her know her past. None of them. Including her husband. What? Well, before you gasp and think, how is that possible? I can assure you, the world is full of trans people in stealth, people that you have met whom you did not know were trans, because no one knows. I've met hundreds of them by now, actually, and the only way I found out about them was that they made themselves known to me, because I'm a writer. I understand the appeal of living in stealth. Women, for instance, who want to be seen as the women they are, not as the boys they used to be, or not as people who have an asterisk next to their name or their gender. But it's also true that in some ways, these people have traded one secret for another. Their peace is only possible because they've invented a fictional past for themselves, and no one, even the people that they love the most, knows the truth. And so, 35 years after the murder in Eastern State, when one of the other original 6 friends is arrested and charged, our heroine, Judith, has a choice to make, because she's the only person alive who knows that her ex-friend is innocent. So in order to prove his innocence, she would have to out herself, to risk and quite possibly and quite probably lose the life she has created with her husband and their adoptive son. Which means that the fundamental questions of this thriller are not only whodunit, or is not only whodunit, it's also, what do we owe the friends of our youth? How much can you completely reinvent yourself? How much weight do the promises made in your 20s carry when you are 50 or 60? Are we now the people we have been? What about you? If it turned out that your spouse had been born a different sex when he or she was a child and somehow never shared that with you, might you feel betrayed? Or does love conquer all? Let's say you've been married 15, 20 years. Would you be willing to give up the life you have created in midlife in order to save someone you only knew, but someone you loved when you were a child? And I guess the most important question of all, in any life that contains a before and an after, how is it possible to live one life and not two? Long Black Veil, Crown Publishing, pub date, April 11th. Thank you.